Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov. This week's double parsha, Matot Maaseh, is the last in the book of Numbers. The journey through the wilderness is nearly complete. The Israelites are just about to enter into the Promised Land. And yes, of course, we have the entire book of Deuteronomy left to read before our narrative ends. However, we know that Devarim is composed almost entirely of long-form speeches given by Moses, which recap the Israelite experience from the liberation in Egypt to the present. And you can imagine the Israelites camped just outside of the land, eager for the final steps of the journey. And our parsha this week defines territory, defines inheritances, reinforces the leadership model that will be used going forward, and also discusses vows, under what circumstances people can and cannot be absolved from their stated declarations. The book of Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, comes to a conclusion by detailing the entire journey of the Jewish people over the past 40 years, naming each of the encampments, beginning with their journey out from Ramses, as the Egyptians were still burying their dead, all the way to the current position in the Transjordan, some 42 encampments later. Amazingly, not a single historical event is recorded along the many stops that are included, the many stops described. Not the splitting of the sea, not the battle against Amalek, not the giving of the Torah, nor the dedication of the Mishkan, not the sin of the spies or the golden calf, not the rebellion of Korach. None of these hugely consequential events are mentioned at all in this review, with one singular exception, a brief description of the death of Aaron. In fact, the Torah mentions that Aaron died on Rosh Chodesh Av, making today Aaron HaKohen's yahrzeit. Why, of all events, does the Torah choose to record the death of Aaron in this context? Surely the loss of Aaron is significant, but is it more significant? Is it of greater importance than the giving of the Torah or the building of the Mishkan? Why then is Aaron's death mentioned here? In classic rabbinic thought, Aaron is the paradigm of peaceful interactions. He was a lover of peace, and more significantly, one who pursued it at all costs. Aaron helped heal broken friendships, helped marriages overcome their turmoil, their challenges. His love for people, in turn, brought them closer to Torah. Even in the judicial context, where his brother Moshe sought strict application of the law, Aaron's approach was generally accepted as the halakha over his brother Moshe, counseling compromise and mediation. In a word, Aaron kept the entire Jewish people cohesive and unified. It is fascinating to note that the rabbinic tradition teaches that following the death of Aaron, not only were the Jewish people attacked, but they actually began retreating backwards towards Egypt, backtracking 8 different encampments along the way. Apparently, without Aaron, the Jewish people were, at least for these moments in the wilderness, incapable of protecting themselves as well as progressing forward. In this context, it must be noted that the timing of Aaron's death is brimming with significance. Today, Rosh Chodesh Av is the only yahrzeit mentioned in the Torah. It is recorded not in Parshat Chukat, where we read of Aaron's passing, but rather in Maaseh, which we read on the Shabbat closest to Rosh Chodesh Av today. As we commence our period of national mourning, we cannot ignore the timing of his death. Rosh Chodesh Av conjures up a mixture of conflicting moods. As Rabbi Helfman mentioned this morning, it may even feel a bit contradictory to sing Hallel, joyous songs of praise, on the day that ushers in a deeply sad period in our people. However, being Jewish often means being able to see the bright side of sad times and not forget to note the sad times during our happy times as well. Aaron had the capacity to see situations from multiple angles and live between extremes. The Talmud teaches us that the destruction of the Second Temple, the traditional purpose for our mourning during these 9 days of Av, was caused by sinat chinam, a sense of baseless hatred. And as we enter the month of Av and see that Elul and Tishrei, the high holidays, are just around the corner, we can reflect upon Aaron's capacity to keep the Jewish people unified and cohesive. His enduring legacy is tied to the importance of mutual respect and compromise. Sadly, we live in an era that has seemed to dismiss compromise. The mere notion of sitting down with people who see the world differently from us and the hope that we can jointly make some progress together is seen as largely unproductive and, if not unbearable. In many ways, our polarized society has all but banished dialogue and diplomacy, replacing them with partisanship and domination. The middle ground has been largely scorched, once fruitful with a balance of attitudes abundant in nuance, now divided by extremism and the intolerance of opinion. Of course, this rather grim depiction has many exceptions. There are varied and many organizations and communities that recognize the incredible power of dialogue and bridge building, and this is particularly true amongst the many committees and initiatives taking place at Holy Blossom as well. Parshiot Matot Maaseh reminds us why compromise always needs a prominent place at the table. In the Torah portion, the tribes of Reuben and Gad, as well as half the tribe of Manasseh, ask permission to settle on the eastern bank of the Jordan. For they are cattle herders. They feel that this land will be better for their stock than the land that is promised to them. However, Moses is angered and horrified. After all the years of wandering, after all the trials and tribulations, after all the promises and blessings, just when they are within an arm's reach of the promised land, these tribes decide it's just not for them. What's more, Moses implores, what will become of the remaining tribes, who will now have fewer soldiers by their sides when they go up against the Canaanites in battle? Emotions are understandably high. But then there is a breakthrough. A compromise is reached. The Gadites and Reubenites state that they will quickly build homes for their families and pens for their livestock on the eastern bank of the Jordan, outside of the land of Israel, and then they will join the rest of the Israelites on the battlefield. Not only will they return to their families and herds, they will not return to their families and herds until the land has been fully captured, but they will serve as frontline soldiers in every single battle until the fighting is done. Additionally, they will forego any territorial inheritance in the land itself. This is a hard bargain. Everyone is upset. Moses wants the people to stay together as a unified nation. Gad and Reuben just want to raise their families and cattle and sheep in peace and quiet. They're also worried about the safety of their families, the elders, their children, as all of the able-bodied men will go off to war with no idea if or when they will ever make it home. About this dilemma, Rabbi Rachel Gervitz teaches that Moses' response is a reminder about the importance of looking out for an entire community, not just one's tribe. Rabbi Gravitz writes, the Gadites and Reubenites may have approached Moses thinking about the well-being of all of the families in their own tribes. However, Moses reminds them that they are a part of something much larger, that all of the tribes were brought together in a moment of revelation at Mount Sinai. They became one people. Each tribe carries responsibilities for the well-being of the 11 others. This is a painful negotiation. There is also a satisfaction in the agreement of a successful compromise. For Moses, the Israelite army will be at full strength when it enters the promised land. And for these 2.5 tribes, they will be able to settle in a land of their own choosing without invoking God's wrath. Now, to say that compromise is a wonderful, joyous concept is also not entirely accurate. It is tough. It can be brutally painful. A compromise often requires sacrificing a strongly held position or belief. You have to give up things for which you care deeply. And when a compromise is truly, truly needed, rarely does anyone actually enjoy the compromise in and of itself. We all like to get our way. We hate to lose. And a compromise requires a degree of loss, a degree of defeat. So if compromise is seen to be detestable, why has it been such an exemplary trait through so much of human history? The Irish statesman and philosopher Edmund Burke once said, "All government, indeed every human benefit and enjoyment, every virtue, every prudent act, is founded on compromise and barter. We balance inconveniences, we give and we take. We remit some rights that we may enjoy others, and we choose rather to be happy citizens than subtle disputants." And then 200 years later, Gerald Ford told the United States Congress that "I believe in friendly compromise, that truth is the glue that holds government together, and compromise is the oil that makes government go." But what do the sages of our tradition tell us of compromise? There is a long Talmudic discussion in Tractate Sanhedrin regarding the disputes of neighbors and the process of reaching a compromise. The halakha falls in line with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karach, who encourages us quite directly in the Tosefta to Sanhedrin, saying that it is meritorious to compromise. It is a mitzvah to compromise. And Maimonides writes in his Mishnah Torah that it is a mitzvah to tell the parties at the beginning of a dispute in court, do you want din or fishara? Do you want strict justice or arbitration? And if they want arbitration, we seek out a compromise for them. A court that always does this is praiseworthy. But we might ask, why? Perhaps a more modern reflection gives greater insight. In commenting on the 2013 negotiations for egalitarian prayer spaces at the Western Wall, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the head of the Union for Reform Judaism, said, "We all were hoping for more. But because we all left unhappy, Natan Sharansky had done a very good job. What he did was he stretched every single one of us to a place where sometimes Jewish leaders, especially rabbinic leaders, do not like to go. It's a little place called compromise. And somehow he understood that whatever solution he would bring, not only to the diaspora leadership, but also to the leadership in Israel, it had to make everybody a little bit uncomfortable, to move everybody off their place of comfort and righteous demand to a place where we could all be together. Compromise can be a tough sell. To say it is always beautiful and to admire it through rose-colored glasses is to be dishonest with ourselves. However, compromise is an absolute necessity to maintain a civil and decent society. We can and should face each other, confront each other, oppose each other as individuals with different opinions. But we need to remember that we are part of a whole, whether that is a whole religion, a whole congregation, a whole country, or a whole humanity. We can disagree with one another and still sit at the same table and still work towards the same purpose. Aaron's life and death can teach us that being made of one piece, no matter what side we are on, only makes us stronger. This Shabbat we remember Aaron HaKohen, Zachary Sadiq Livracha. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing. Shabbat Shalom.